Hey, this is Dan and
My name is Matt.
coming at you for 1001 movies to see before you die. For those of you who have been following along, this is the third episode of 1001 movies from the general editor Stephen J. Schneider, updated by Ian Hayden Smith. Movies that they think that you should see before you die, and we are diving deep into that. We did select a random number generator. We spun the wheel, kind of, which is taking us further down the road. So here we are today. And what movie were we talking about today, Matt?
We are talking about 1956's The Ten Commandments by Cecil, however you say it, B. DeMille.
Yep. And we are on page 315 for those who are following along in their books. I just want to say thank you to the folks that were on our last videos, putting some comments out there, asking some questions. Definitely want to get to know you guys and get a feeling for you. But really super excited to dive into the Ten Commandments. And I think for the last few episodes, we have been reading an excerpt straight out of the book. So we'll go ahead and kick that off for you. Skipping down with a running time of nearly 4 hours, Cecil B. DeMille's last feature and most extravagant blockbuster is full of absurdities and vulgarities, but the colors ravishing, and DeMille's form of showmanship, which includes his own narration, never falters. Charlton Heston might be said to achieve his apotheosis as Moses, and most of the others in the cast are comparably mythic. Simultaneously ludicrous and splendid, this epic is driven by the sort of personal conviction rarely found in subsequent Hollywood monoliths. To read it properly, one has to see it as an ideological, spiritual manifesto relating specifically to how DeMille viewed the Cold War world in 1956. Thus, when he appears in front of a gold tassel curtain to introduce the film, his main point isn't simply to use of ancient sources such as Philo and Josephus to recount the 30 years of Moses' life omitted in the Bible, but also declare the theme of the picture is whether man should be ruled by God's law or by the whims of a dictator like Ramses. By dictator, clearly thinking of the figures of the time. So, with that in mind, again, as we have been doing, we've been going back and forth talking about parts of the movies that have standed out to us, and then also whether we agree ultimately that if this is a movie that you should see before you die. So, Matt, I'll kick the floor over to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the film, and we'll go back and forth a little bit and ultimately do our wrap up.
Sure. As we've been doing this, as you know, if you've been watching since episode one, I've been taking notes. I used to do it on my phone, but now, went back when we were the movie club, the picture this. But now I write. I have this notebook and I write as I go because, to be honest, my memory isn't the best that it used to be back in the day. Plus, I watch a lot of content and a lot of films just on a regular basis for my own self. So just since I've watched the Ten Commandments, and I just watched the Ten Commandments the other day, but I have watched six more movies since I've watched the Ten Commandments. That's not an exaggeration. So I make the notes so I can remember things. So if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Um, so this was nominated for 7 Oscars. It had one win, ironically, Best Effects. Um, One thing that stood out to me was the effects seemed kind of, how I say, cheesy, but I also, like I mentioned with A Trip to the Moon, you have to put yourself in that time period in 1956. What were they doing in film in 1956? And I think for the time period, this probably was groundbreaking. Um, just right off the bat, intro here, we got a really, really long overture, which I don't know if you remember the beginning of the movie, Dan, but there was like what seemed like forever, just a title card that said overture, and it just played for what felt like 5 minutes. I'm sure it was probably only like two, but and then we get, I had completely forgotten. I had seen this movie before, but it had been years since I was a child, and we get uh, Cecil B. DeMille himself introducing the movie. And I like this idea. I think this is a good idea. I have done this once before. I just made a documentary about our grandfather, and in the beginning of that, I come on and kind of introduce it. So I'm a big fan of the directors introducing the movies. I think that should be something that's brought back. Sometimes if you go into the movie theater, like I know before Top Gun Maverick, um, they played like Tom Cruise, depending on in my theater anyway. I can't speak for all theaters, but I know they played like Tom Cruise and the director, sitting next to each other discussing the film. I've seen this done with like Tim Burton before as well. So it's a thing that still exists, but it's not as common. But I was a big fan of that. Um, but for me, watching it, you get a feeling right away that you're about to watch something special. It just seems like an event, a spectacle. Um, let's see. The very dark opening. The Pharaoh orders that all newborns are going to be killed for fear of the Hebrews taking over Egypt one day. We see a guard with a bloody knife having just killed a baby. It's very dark, menacing kind of. I was like, oh, look out, 1950s, doing some dark stuff here. Um, I made a note, and I don't know if you knew this, Dan, but when they were trying to get the 1989 Batman movie made, the one of the producers, Bruce Timm, or was it Michael Uslan? Sorry, not Bruce Timm, Michael Uslan, uh, used this movie as a jumping point to help Warner Brothers approve the Batman film. Uh, they had already done Superman, and they weren't really looking to do another comic book film, and they had been pushing. Michael Uslan had been pushing to get Batman off the ground ever since the 70s when Superman was released. And during one of his meetings, he was in the office with the head Warner guy. I'm not going to name names because I don't know who. I don't remember the story accurately, so I don't want to misinterpret. But he's in the meeting with the head corporate guy, and he sees a cross on the wall, and he sees Superman memorabilia over the office. And the guys tell him, I just don't see any story value in superheroes. I don't think that the world is ready for a Batman movie. And along the lines of Michael Uslan says, "Hey, I noticed that you've got a cross hanging on your wall. Are you religious?" And the man says, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Okay, so you're familiar with the story of Moses?" And he says, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Okay, and you got a lot of Superman stuff in here. Are you a fan of Superman?" Yes, I am. I thought it was a great film. And Uslan goes on to make the comparison of how Jor-El, as his planet was dying and about to blow up, puts his only son in a rocket and sends it to safety so he could be raised by earthlings or other people to become something greater. And Moses was put in a basket so he could not be killed and sent away to other people so he could be raised into something greater. And that comparison is what greenlit the 1989 Batman movie. Now, this was years before Burton was attached, Keaton, like none of that had happened yet. This was just trying to get the project greenlit so they could start working on it. But that's what did it, this movie. Um, I'm going to stop just for now. I got more to say, but I'm going to give you a chance. What are your initial thoughts, Dan?
Coming off the top of this and the end of the Ten Commandments, haven't seen this movie before like you. I know you said you used to watch it a lot as a child. I did not have that. I have, however, seen The Prince of Egypt, which both are apparently based on the same story. For
Not
this,
only not only the Prince of Egypt, but did you? I don't mean to cut you off, but did you see? It was a Christian Bale movie, Exodus, uh, something Exodus Gods and Kings or something like that
I
from a few
have
years
not.
ago. It's a remake of this movie. I say remake of this movie. It's a retelling of the Moses story. But continue. I'm sorry.
But to start off, a couple things I do want to say that, keeping in mind this was in the 1950s, I do feel like we could have had more Egyptian representation in the film. That's one thing I did want to touch on. However, I do know they partnered with the Egypt Historical Society and some other folks to try to get what was accurate up to that point into the movie. So they were trying to do their research and trying to make it as historically accurate as possible. Um, but overall, this kind of reminded me of the first film that we had watched when we were watching A Trip to the Moon. It started off almost like a play, and that's kind of the feeling that I got from the Ten Commandments. Overall, like you said, we're shown just the curtain and the director standing in front of the curtain, going over what we're about to see. It opens up, the film starts, and one thing I have to say is he had a ton a ton of scene. I'm sorry, coughing, of course, right now. A ton of scenery, a lot of a lot of actors. I mean, just the scale of this thing was immense. And going into this, I know one thing: you're looking at the length of the movie, trying to get involved into that, and trying to set yourself up to, okay, this is going to be 4 hours of my life that I dedicate to watching this thing. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. Before I kick it back over to you, one thing I do want to say is I wasn't really prepared for the pacing. And I think they gave you a lot of time to think about things as it was happening. And again, it played out a lot like a play. But to me, there was a lot that probably could have been left out that wasn't. One thing that I do want to point out too, because I like stats. I'm a stats guy, really, when it comes to finances. So this film cost the equivalent of about $120 million in today's money to make. Ended up making $1.2 billion. This was not a small film. In fact, when this film was released, it was the biggest one, had the biggest budget of any film ever up to that point. So, again, a lot of work into the actors that they hired. I mean, we're not talking about small name people that were involved in this film. The amount of extras that they had involved, the set design, the backdrops, everything that they'd done, even the special effects, which, again, to your point now, looking at are cheesy, probably took a lot of time, effort, and energy at that point to create and put together. So, a huge undertaking, almost as much probably as what it took to build the pyramids to make this movie happen. If we're gonna make that comparison, but kick it back over to you, and we'll just keep riffing off each other until we get to the end of where we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, this was a 4-hour movie, so I think it's expected that we're not just going to be able to knock this one out in like a few minutes, like we did the first couple. Um, Bouncing back off my notes, a couple things that I liked. Um, I thought Yul Brynner as Ramses was a standout. He was great here. I think he was definitely one of the highlights of the movie. Just that the villain, you didn't really like him, but you did like him. You love to hate him, so to speak. Um, I also really liked Anne Baxter uh, as what is her name? Nefertari, who was Ramsey's wife and Moses's potential love interest in the beginning. Um, I thought she was fantastic. The costumes, the imagery, it was all great, magnificent. I mean, it was nominated for costume design for an Oscar. I think there's a reason for that. You can look at the costumes and just tell, they knew they knew what they were doing. And I think I mentioned before, the whole movie just feels like a spectacle. It's, you know, it long? Yes. Could they have left things out? Probably. But in not doing so, I do feel that, this often gets cited as one of the most biblically accurate uh, films ever made. And whether or not you believe in the Bible and things like that, if you're going off of the stories in the Bible, this is most accurate and doesn't leave much out. They included pretty much everything that the Bible has to say about Moses, more or less. Uh, I totally forgot Vincent Price was in this movie. He started talking. I was like, that sounds like Vincent Price. And next thing he didn't look the same because he had a clean shaven face. And then next thing I know, I'm Googling, is Vincent Price in Ten Commandments? And sure enough, yes, he is. So that was a nice surprise. A quote. I'm going to end it here, I think, with a quote that Moses gave. Moses says at one point in the movie, shortly after it's revealed, or shortly after he finds out that he is Hebrew and not Egyptian, he says, "What change is there in me, Egyptian or Hebrew? I am still Moses." And I think that is really deep. I think that can be taken in a lot of ways, especially in today's times, with, the diversity and things like that. We are still human beings. We are still who we are. Just because of our nationality or our race or, what have you, we are still who we are. And I think that was a that was one of my favorite lines in the movie. And that's where I'm going to leave it until we wrap it up here.
To kind of go back on to a part of what we were talking about or what you were talking about. So one thing out of this book, because I do want to reference that since that's what we're going off of a little bit, just to talk about how this was an influential film during the Cold War. And you had to think about how many instances were the words freedom, liberty, justice. How many times were those words used in this film? I feel like it was a very patriotic film, even though it was referencing biblical material. It definitely was against dictatorships. I feel like overall that was definitely a huge, huge, huge part of this film. Um, I know you said what your favorite parts were. To me, I think the actor that played the Pharaoh did a really great job before Ramses. I can't remember his name. Seti, I believe. Um, when he starts talking to Moses as is brought to him in chains, and Ramses tells him that Moses is the deliverer, and then Moses admits that his mother and father were Hebrews. He is the son of slaves, uh, and basically that he wanted to be among them. He said that he loved Seti, but though that's where he was from. Like he couldn't deny where he was from. And Seti is heartbroken, and he sits back in the chair. I think he's unable to look at Moses. He was unable to look at his sister because he felt betrayed. And at that point, he said or told Ramses, do what you will with him. I don't want to know. And that's when Ramses ends up taking him out to the desert. But then we flash forward and we go to his deathbed. And he said, he was going to break something that he had said, that his name would never cross his lips. He had stricken Moses' name from every record, every pillar, every piece of monument that existed. But on his lips as he died, the love for him came back. And he says, Moses, 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 as he slips away. And I thought that was really profound in a way that, he had such love for this person. And in the end, kind of brought him back. And it makes you think, really, regardless of what side of that you fell on, maybe there was some redemption that even him in his final moments had and able to come to. And that's something else that Moses said, whoever comes to him would have been saved. And in the end, just a scene where we had the golden calf set up, and he had come down off Mount Sinai, and he had the Ten Commandments in his hand, and He's angry and he's going to smash the Ten Commandments. And he throws them at the golden calf and all those who had literally, 40 days prior just been saved from certain death or going back into slavery. They completely turned their back on God and created this false idol and then literally just disappear into the ground. They're taken down into the ground, almost like into the volcano once the golden calf was destroyed. It was a lot of beautiful artwork, and honestly, I felt again kind of like in the first one, A Trip to the Moon. It felt like we were watching art being made more so than a movie, and again, like the pacing to me felt more like a play. It just, for some reason, I just kept coming back to that in the first half, and in the second half, it felt to me more like a movie, if that makes any kind of sense. Because I feel like that's when the action really started taking off, and we had built up so much, and I
And
know that's probably
when you say first half and second half, there's literally an interlude in this thing, which I also had forgotten. Like it stops, and I know you quite frequently you'll watch movies over time. I'm usually the type of person that will sit through and watch it in one sitting. This I did not. It took me when it was interlude time, I took a break. I stopped it for like 2 hours and went and did something else, and then came back to it and sat back down and finished it off. I think that helps, and I didn't mind it, but that's just something else for people who may have not have seen this that may check this out because we're discussing it. That you're going to get the really long overture, you're going to get the director introduction, and then you're going to get an interlude like 2 hours and 15 minutes into this thing because you've got another whole almost 2 hours left to go. And it's like a whole nother movie after you've just sat through a whole movie. But anyway, sorry.
no, you almost feel like Moses coming off the mountain every time. He'd just come back whiter and longer hair, just crazy. So even if he's only up there 40 days, he came back. Woo, he's
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
That's really all I had for my key takeaways. I don't know, Matt. How do you have anything else you'd like to add, or do you want to get into how we feel?
I think, I think I'm good. I think I hit all my keynotes. I think I've said everything that I really have to say for now. I think I'm ready to put this one in the bag. Do you want me to go first?
Um,
Or
sure, go
would
ahead.
you? Oh, okay. um, so is this a movie that I think personally you must see before you die? I'm going to say yes. Big thumbs up on that one. It 100% is a movie you must see before you die. If nothing else, for just the spectacle that it is, the event that it is. Uh, I'm not sure, and I've never seen the other uh, films like of this time period, like the Ben Hur, and I've seen Samson and Delilah, but I haven't seen like a lot of these other types of films from this time period. So I'm not sure if they're like this, but I'm not. If they aren't, then I'm not sure that there is another film quite like this. So for that reason, and because it is such a massive movie, uh, I'm going to say that it is a movie you must see before you die. How about you, Dan?
I don't think it matters which side of the fence you come in on this, as far as your religious standpoint. I think that if you're a lover of film, that this is 100% a movie you must see before you die. It took me 4 times to sit through the entire thing, but I stuck with it. Honestly, regardless of how the pacing was or any of that other that we've talked about, it was, again, like you said, it was a spectacle. It was definitely something that tremendous amount of effort and force was behind to get done, and it was overall a beautiful story. I think they incorporated all the elements that they could have at that time period, 1956. Like they threw everything in the kitchen sink into it. they did it and they made it pop. And I think it's definitely made its mark on cinematography today. And we're going to be feeling this probably for decades and decades and decades to come in the movie industry. So definitely a big one to watch. Yes, it has a huge runtime. Take it in small bits. Either watch it like Matt or do it like me. I came home from work, flipped it on for about an hour, turned it off, came back the next day, another hour. I feel like you can pick it up pretty easy, not forget a lot, just keep trucking with it. But definitely a great film to watch, and glad we got to watch this one.
For sure. That wraps this episode up mostly. Again, we like to thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you checking us out. If you don't already, please subscribe. Click that little subscribe button, the little notification bell, so you get notified every time that we post a new episode. We've been doing this on Fridays. So every Friday it seems to be our groove for a new episode. And speaking of new episodes, Dan the Movie Man, I think it might be time to pick our next movie from the book.
All right. So we're going to go to our secret picker.
I did it last time. Would you like to do it, or do you want me to do it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do one.
Okay, so Dan is going to randomize and give us a number, and we are going to find out in real time what we will be watching next.
Guys, we're doing this in the moment. So this is
in the moment.
Yes, in the moment. So it's telling us to go to page 521, Matt.
521. Well, that tells me it's newer than the Ten Commandments. There we go. 5:15.
Could be scary.
Oh boy.
Oh, we missed Clockwork Orange.
We did. Okay, so we've got 2 on this one, and ironically, Dan, you and I have seen this page before.
Wow. So we have both of them. So I guess we can pick. It's La Chagrin et la Petite, The Sorrow and the Pity, which is a French film. And I believe we said that was more of a documentary style.
Yeah, it's another 4-hour documentary about the French's involvement in World War II, I believe.
I think for both of us, the other option would probably be the best, which I know we both watched, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which actually lines up, Matt, because if you like, we're supposed to go see the new Wonka movie tomorrow.
Have you not seen Wonka yet?
We have not. So we're supposed to go see it tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
So we could do like a dual feature kind of thing, because I know you've seen it.
Yeah.
If you'd want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Willy Wonka it is. So just for clarification for people listening and like, what are they talking about? 4 hours, Willy Wonka. Some pages on this book, because I'm sure this is going to happen again, have 2 movies listed on them. So this was one of them. The 4-hour documentary that was Dan so eloquently spoke something petite something, and and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, both from the same year, 1975, and we're choosing Willy Wonka, but we're not crossing 521 the page off because there's another movie on there. So when we get 521 again, we will be watching the 4-hour documentary.
I think just right now, since Wonka hasn't been out that long, this would be a really good time to talk about it. So
yeah, find the origins of Wonka. I'm excited. I can't believe I didn't know you hadn't seen it yet. So I'm excited to see what you think about Wonka, and then to discuss Willy Wonka with you next week.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys. Keep watching.